need to
Yeah.
walk them through 1, 2, 3, and 4 to get them there.
Yeah. And it's really hard because, we always say like being at the top is very lonely. And, my example of this is like I remember being a carpenter and watching lead carpenters I was working with and thinking, gosh, these guys are really like disorganized and like we don't have the material when we need it and all this sort of thing. And then, whatever, few months later, a year later or something, I became a lead carpenter. And in my first 3 weeks of doing it, I was failing miserably at organizing and controlling everything is because it's hard once you're in that seat, you really get an understanding of what it feels like. And it's the same for like literally every single business owner that I've, encountered in my program as well as one-on-one. We all have a component of this, right? Where it's like you're making decisions, especially when it's the vision or the direction of a company. You're making all these decisions, and oftentimes you don't really have anybody to bounce that off of and to say, hey, what do you think? Like, what's your experience with this? Or, you don't really know, and you're kind of just making choices. And I remember being a carpenter or being a lead in a super, and you're making decisions, especially in the remodeling or renovating world where like, things aren't, like the two-dimensional drawing does not turn out to be the three-dimensional reality like it does oftentimes in custom home building.
Mhm.
So you have to make decisions and then you have to live with those decisions. So and there's a level of confidence that you build over years, but initially it's really hard. Same thing happens as a business owner, right? So that confidence grows in years. You talk to somebody that's been doing it for 20 or 30 years, there's just a confidence there because it's just the years of experience that they've gone through, and they kind of get a sense of how they're going to get their outcomes and all of that. But yeah, it's the confidence piece. It's lonely at the top. Leading is really, really hard. It's a lot easier to manage. Everyone, listen to this, I'm sure can nod their head and agree with that. If you've been in a leadership position, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, you just spend a lot of time alone, and then you spend a lot of time walking around alone. What the processing stuff,
That's
going
right.
through, figuring out
That's
how do
right.
you create these outcomes? How do you get the sale happens with you first,
Hmm.
and you have to get yourself over the hump, and then you have to go figure out how you can get somebody else over it. And
Yeah.
like you said, it's a lonely word to be in sometimes.
Yeah. And one of the hardest parts too is exactly just riffing off of what you just said about like how do you actually then get other people to help get, towards that outcome. So we take the example of a construction business where say you're doing remodeling or custom home building, and you likely have superintendents and project managers and potentially, depending on the scale of your operations, an operation manager, general manager, et cetera, pre-construction coordinators, et cetera. So, you typically, business owner is still very involved in the sales process, which I firmly believe in. I do believe, even for the companies that are doing 10 plus million in residential construction, I encourage those business owners to stay in that seat. Now, they don't do a lot of the heavy lifting of the sales, but they are the face of the brand, right? And they generally speaking can always represent the company in the best light. I'm sure there's going to be differing opinions on that. That's just my own personal opinion. But how do you ensure that what you sell as the brand owner in that sales and slash pre-construction process becomes the reality during construction or the actual execution? And that's where we always talk about a bit of brand dilution. So the solution here is that leadership, is that mentorship, right? Whether you're doing it yourself or you are putting in practice a mentorship program within your organization, which I know some people are listening to this are like, I'm doing so much already. How could I possibly do this? But this is how good companies become great and how they grow is that, you can't do it alone, and you have to like spend the time and invest in the people that are in your company. Not everyone's going to be an A player. I get it, but you have to find those people and you have to invest in them because they're the ones that can actually like execute those projects without that brand dilution that, we never want to feel.
Yeah, and I think what you're talking about doing just does not happen enough in construction because you want to grow,
Hmm.
you want to have the ability to put other people in leadership roles in their careers to grow.